The title of the lecture today is The Psychology of Boredom, the 10 causes and 10 cures. So we can see that there's something about the absurdity that already captures our attention. When a person's bored, it means it's hard to keep their attention focused on a particular area because they're bored by it. On the other side of the spectrum, if something's interesting and it holds your attention and captivates you, fascinates you. That's opposite from boredom. And boredom also could be based on a relative aspect. For example, you can put somebody who's a drug addict in a situation and they're bored in the conversation. They take their drug of choice, whether it's alcohol or some other substance, and they might find it fascinating. And so it's not defined by a particular stimulus. It's an internal aspect that shows how it's internal. As a matter of fact, a fair amount of substance abuse is related to boredom, where people want to have more excitement and find life more interesting. They turn to alcohol or even coffee. Coffee adds a certain excitement and it heightens the experience. Most people don't like to be bored unless they've been leading a life that's been so overwhelming, filled with calamities. They welcome boredom. Oh, I just would love to be bored. But for most people, they do anything to avoid boredom. And we have a whole culture based on that, going to movies, we have books, going out to nightclubs, going to restaurants, just anything to escape boredom. Now, I'm going to go over the causes, and they have to do with if there's a lack of meaning in a particular situation, it tends to be boring. If there's a lack of beauty, that could add to the boringness. Also, if it's monotonous, whether it's a monotone voice or just the same thing day in and day out, people find that boring. Even no matter how good a life is, every day, same thing. Get up at the same time, go do the exact same thing, come home, do the same thing, go to sleep. So, in a sense, that becomes boring. However interesting it is, a person may be doing fascinating things to somebody else that's fascinating, but it becomes boring. Now, if a person's bored, it's made even worse if they're not feeling well. Some situation that normally might be interesting is now boring. For example, if they're depressed. If a person is depressed, you can put them in a situation that they would normally find interesting. They might, for instance, like skiing. They go skiing and they're depressed. They don't even enjoy it. It's boring. Nothing has any real meaning to it. It's not interesting. There's a lack, if you don't have an interest, it could be a subject you have no interest in. For instance, if you don't know anything about baseball, you say, well, I don't have any interest. It's boring. Everything goes slowly. The ball is pitched. Guy swings at the bat. You got to wait a few minutes and it happens again. A person may find it extremely boring. But that same person, if he had a bet of all his money on the game, would not find it boring. The same situation. The guy's throwing the ball. The batter swings at it. The catcher catches it. Same exact thing. But has a different meaning to him. He's got all his money, every penny he has in the world, riding on the game. He'll be glued to it, absolutely glued. So the thing which is normally extremely boring changes. And yet nothing outwardly is different. It's just the meaning. That's the meaning that makes something boring or interesting. So boring is an internal thing. And I'm going to make the point that boring has to do with your thoughts, that you're having boring thoughts. The thought that, gee, he's pitching the ball, he swings at it, the catcher gets it and throws it, or he hits it, somebody eventually catches it, throws it. Those are very boring thoughts. You say, gee, then I got to wait another couple of minutes. It's boring. Because the person's having boring thoughts about it. But he says, gee, I've got every penny, I've got a chance to make a fortune on this. He's having very exciting thoughts. I have a chance to double my money. Every penny I have can be doubled. That's an exciting thought. He can double his money based on the outcome of this baseball game. So he has an interesting thought. So I'm making a point that Just as beauty is in the eye of the beholder, boringness is in the eye of the beholder. But more specifically, boringness is in the thought of the beholder. Your thoughts what make it boring. Also, very often in something being boring, there's a lack of patience. So when is this going to get over with? You know, gee, I've been waiting. I'm bored out of my mind. When's this thing going to end? So that typically involves that. And typically, there's a lack of stimulation. And if you're with somebody, there's a lack of good companionship. That could also be boring. And again, we can then take, just to show you it's all based on context, that is contextual. You have two people together and there's a silence. And neither one, if it's a situation where neither has anything to say, it can become pretty boring. On the other hand, a silence could be electrifying.